Elena Brooks was 28 years old when the quiet of her wedding morning shattered her understanding of family. She had built her life around patience and purpose, teaching children with learning differences in a public elementary school just outside Boston. Progress came slowly in her classroom, but every small breakthrough mattered. That belief had shaped her, grounded her, and carried her through years of being overlooked. 3 years earlier, she had met Julian during a school volunteer program, never imagining the man who sat cross-legged on the classroom floor would one day be the reason she learned her own worth. On the morning she was meant to marry him, Elena woke early, nerves fluttering with anticipation. Before I continue, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from today. Your one click really helps support the channel. Her parents had arrived the night before. Breakfast was planned. Laughter, photos, simple moments before the ceremony. But the apartment was silent. Too silent. No footsteps. No coffee brewing. No familiar sounds of her mother humming softly. When Elena stepped into the guest room and found the bed perfectly made, her chest tightened. Their bags were gone. Phones went straight to voicemail. Then she saw the envelope on the counter, her name written in her sister's unmistakable handwriting. In that moment, before she even opened it, Elena sensed something irreversible had already been done. The letter was brief, deliberate, and devastating. Vanessa Brooks had always been efficient with words when cruelty was the goal. She explained that she had taken their parents to Paris that morning, calling it a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity she refused to pass up. The timing, she wrote, was unfortunate but necessary. She dismissed the wedding as small, unimpressive, and something that could be celebrated later if needed. Vanessa claimed she was sparing their parents embarrassment, sparing them awkward conversations in a barn with school teachers and modest guests. The final lines cut deepest. She described Julian as pleasant but unremarkable, a man with no future worth waiting around for. Elena sat motionless, the letter slipping from her fingers. This was not a misunderstanding. It was intentional. Vanessa had not stolen attention. She had erased Elena entirely. The betrayal echoed backward through Elena's life, connecting moments she had tried to forget. Her wedding day was not the beginning of this pain. It was the culmination. As tears finally came, they were not loud or dramatic. They were heavy, silent, and filled with a grief that went far beyond one missed ceremony. Her phone rang. It was Hannah Lewis, calling to help her get ready. Elena answered, her voice barely steady. "They are gone," she said. "All of them." Elena had grown up in a home that looked stable from the outside. Robert Brooks worked as an accountant. Elaine Brooks taught piano lessons from the living room. Money was tight but manageable. What shaped Elena more than finances was comparison. Vanessa, 2 years older, was confident, striking, effortlessly impressive. Teachers remembered Vanessa's name. Friends admired her certainty. Elena learned early how to shrink quietly beside her. Reading had been difficult as a child, words blurring and resisting her focus. A perceptive teacher intervened, changing Elena's path by giving her tools instead of judgment. That moment planted the seed of her future. While Elena worked twice as hard to keep up, Vanessa collected achievements with ease. Valedictorian. Full scholarship. Elite internships. Family dinners revolved around Vanessa's milestones. Elena's victories were acknowledged politely, then forgotten. When Elena discovered her passion for special education, it felt like a calling, not a consolation prize. She poured herself into it, finding meaning where others saw modest ambition. Vanessa, meanwhile, entered corporate finance and climbed quickly. Promotions. Travel. Prestige. Their parents never said one daughter mattered more, but the pattern was unmistakable. Elena learned to lower expectations, to celebrate quietly, to stop hoping for equal enthusiasm. By the time she met Julian, she believed love had to be earned through usefulness, not simply given. Julian Mercer entered Elena's life without spectacle. He volunteered once a week at her school, introducing himself simply as a consultant. He listened more than he spoke. When he sat with a dyslexic student who refused to read aloud, Julian shared his own struggle without embarrassment. That honesty changed everything. Elena noticed how children trusted him instinctively. Their first conversations unfolded naturally, centered on teaching strategies and lived experience, not resumes. Coffee followed. Then long walks. Julian never tried to impress her. He asked thoughtful questions and remembered the answers. His apartment was comfortable but understated. His car practical. He preferred cooking together to expensive dinners. When he eventually invited her to a charity gala, Elena borrowed a dress, feeling momentarily out of place. That evening, subtle details surfaced. People greeted Julian with respect. The event director thanked him personally. He explained, gently and without pride, that his family owned a real estate firm that supported educational causes. Only later did Elena learn the scale of that truth. Julian had grown up surrounded by wealth and had deliberately chosen distance from its excesses. He wanted to be known for his character, not his inheritance. Elena understood that instinct deeply. When he proposed during a quiet picnic in a community garden, she said yes without hesitation. For the first time, she felt chosen without comparison. Wedding planning exposed every old fracture. Elena wanted something intimate, meaningful, honest. Julian agreed completely. Vanessa criticized everything. The venue was too rustic. The food too simple. The guest list unimpressive. When Julian met Elena's family, Vanessa dismissed him instantly, assuming his modest demeanor reflected limited ambition. Their parents listened without protest. Elena absorbed the familiar sting but said nothing. She was done seeking approval. The night before the wedding, Elaine's voice sounded strained on the phone, but Elena ignored the unease. She believed love would be enough. On the wedding morning, that belief was tested brutally. After Hannah arrived and Julian rushed over, everything changed. Julian did not ask for explanations. He held Elena while she cried, steady and present. His parents arrived moments later. Evelyn Mercer read the letter once and closed it with quiet fury. Jonathan Mercer said only one thing: no one does this to family. When Elena worried aloud about the ceremony, the aisle, the guests, Evelyn took her hands firmly. Family is who shows up, she said. We are here. Something shifted inside Elena then. Her parents' absence no longer defined the day. Vanessa's cruelty no longer controlled the story. Elena lifted her head, wiped her tears, and made a choice that would change everything. We're getting married today, she said. Exactly as planned. What happened next unfolded with calm efficiency, not chaos. Evelyn Mercer stepped into motion the way experienced leaders do when a crisis threatens something precious. She didn't dramatize or overpromise. She simply made calls. Vendors who had been tentative suddenly became available. Staff expanded quietly. The coordinator at the historic inn confirmed adjustments without surprise, as if contingency plans had always existed. Julian stayed beside Elena, anchoring her when doubt crept in. He offered one option only once, postpone, and accepted her decision immediately when she declined. That mattered. It wasn't about proving strength, it was about choosing joy. Hannah helped Elena dress, steady hands replacing the ones she had expected from her mother. As makeup was applied, Elena realized the trembling had stopped. Not because the pain was gone, but because it no longer controlled her. Outside, the gardens were being refined, not transformed beyond recognition, just elevated. White florals, soft lighting, live strings warming up. Nothing felt excessive. It felt intentional. When Elena finally stood before the mirror, she didn't see a woman abandoned. She saw someone who had been forced to decide who mattered. That clarity was grounding. Downstairs, Jonathan Mercer spoke briefly with Julian, reminding him that composure would shape the day more than spectacle. Julian nodded, calm as ever. He had never wanted grandeur. What he wanted was Elena walking toward him by choice. And that was exactly what was about to happen. Guests began arriving, unaware of the morning's rupture. Friends from Elena's school greeted one another warmly. Colleagues from Julian's professional world blended seamlessly, drawn by respect rather than curiosity. No one asked where her parents were. No one whispered. When Elena worried about the empty seats reserved for family, Evelyn quietly adjusted the arrangement so the absence wouldn't feel like a statement. Before the ceremony, Jonathan approached Elena with measured gentleness. He did not pretend to replace anyone. He simply offered support. If you'll allow it, he said, I'd be honored to walk with you. Elena accepted, not as a substitute, but as a symbol of who had chosen her today. As the music began, the garden stilled. Julian waited at the altar, composed but visibly moved. When Elena stepped forward, she felt neither shame nor triumph, only presence. She wasn't performing resilience. She was living it. Their vows were simple, spoken clearly, without embellishment. Julian's words acknowledged the morning without bitterness. He spoke of choice, partnership, and showing up when it matters. Elena spoke of patience, trust, and learning to accept love without comparison. The ceremony ended not with applause, but with a collective exhale. Something honest had happened. It wasn't the wedding Elena imagined months ago. It was better in a way she hadn't known to ask for. It marked an ending she needed and a beginning she chose. The reception carried the same quiet confidence. The barn glowed with warm light and careful detail. Music flowed naturally, live but unobtrusive. Conversation filled the space, not spectacle. Elena noticed how seamlessly Julian's parents moved through the room, welcoming guests without drawing attention to themselves. It struck her how power didn't need volume. Midway through the evening, Elena learned why photographers lingered respectfully at the edge of the property. Julian's family had long-standing ties within the city, and milestones involving them were occasionally noted by local outlets. There was no announcement, no display. Just documentation. Elena found the irony sharp but contained. Vanessa had feared whispers. Instead, there was admiration. As Elena and Julian shared their first dance, he leaned in and asked softly if she was truly okay. She considered the question carefully. The answer surprised her. Yes, she said. Not because the pain had vanished, but because it no longer defined her. Fireworks lit the sky as a closing gesture Jonathan had quietly arranged. Elena laughed, the sound light and real. The night ended without excess, without apology. When they finally left, Elena felt something unfamiliar settle in her chest. Peace. The kind that comes when expectations fall away and truth takes their place. Paris learned the truth within hours. Vanessa saw the headlines first, images of Elena radiant, Julian composed, the Mercer name unmistakable. Messages followed quickly, frantic and disorganized. Calls from their parents came next, filled with shock and sudden regret. Elena did not answer. She and Julian left the city the following morning, choosing distance over reaction. On the flight, Elena turned her phone off completely. Not out of spite, but necessity. She needed silence to understand what had changed. 2 weeks later, when they returned, the world had shifted subtly. Elena's parents reached out again, their tone no longer confident, now uncertain. Vanessa's messages moved from disbelief to apology, then to defensiveness. Elena read them once and set the phone down. She felt no urgency. Back at school, life resumed its familiar rhythm. Children greeted her eagerly. Lessons continued. Progress happened. Elena realized that the most grounding thing in her life had remained untouched by family chaos. Julian supported her without pushing resolution. You don't owe anyone speed, he told her. That was new, too, permission to heal at her own pace. Weeks passed. The noise quieted. For the first time, Elena wasn't bracing for the next comparison. She was simply living. Change didn't arrive as reconciliation. It arrived as autonomy. Elena began working with Julian's Family Foundation on an expanded literacy program, not as a favor, but as a collaborator. Her expertise mattered. Meetings were practical, respectful, and grounded in results. At home, Elena and Julian built routines that reflected who they were, not who others expected them to be. When her parents finally asked to meet, Elena declined politely, not permanently. Timing mattered now. Vanessa sent one long message that stood apart from the rest. It lacked excuses. It admitted jealousy without justification. Elena didn't respond immediately, but she didn't delete it either. That alone felt like progress. One evening, as Elena and Julian walked through their neighborhood, she realized something fundamental had shifted. Her wedding day had exposed every old wound, but it had also severed her dependence on approval. The absence that once defined her family role no longer controlled her choices. She had not been rescued by wealth or spectacle. She had been met by consistency, respect, and presence. As they reached home, Julian asked her a simple question. Are you proud of yourself? Elena thought for a moment, then nodded. Yes, she said. And for the first time, that answer didn't feel borrowed from anyone else's expectations. Autumn arrived quietly, bringing with it a steadiness Elena hadn't known before. Her days settled into a rhythm that felt earned rather than imposed. At school, the expanded literacy program gained traction, and teachers from neighboring districts visited to observe her methods. The work mattered, and for once, it wasn't framed as a consolation prize. Julian remained attentive without hovering, letting Elena define the pace of everything, including her family. When her parents asked again to meet, Elena agreed to coffee on neutral ground. She arrived alone, choosing clarity over comfort. Robert and Elaine Brooks looked smaller than she remembered, their confidence worn thin by consequence. They apologized without interruption this time. No justifications. No references to Paris or opportunities missed. Elena listened carefully, noting what was said and what wasn't. When she spoke, her voice stayed level. She named the pattern, not the trip, but the years of comparison that led to it. The silence that followed was heavy and deserved. Elaine cried quietly. Robert nodded, acknowledging truths he had never voiced. Elena did not offer forgiveness. She offered honesty. Healing, she explained, would not be rushed. As they parted, nothing was resolved, but something was finally understood. Elena walked away without the familiar ache of guilt. She had spoken her truth without shrinking. That alone felt like progress. Vanessa reached out less frequently after that. When she did, her messages were restrained, careful in a way Elena had never seen before. Months passed before Elena agreed to meet her sister, and only in a public cafe. Vanessa arrived without her usual polish, posture tense, confidence dulled. She didn't lead the conversation. That was new. When she finally spoke, her words were measured. She admitted the wedding hadn't been about Paris. It had been about control. About proving whose life mattered more. Saying it aloud seemed to exhaust her. Elena listened without interruption. When it was her turn, she didn't revisit old grievances. She focused on boundaries. What she would accept. What she would not. She made it clear that wealth had changed nothing. Vanessa's behavior would have been cruel regardless of Julian's background. That truth landed hard. Vanessa nodded, absorbing it without defense. There was no reconciliation that day, but there was accountability. As they left, Elena felt neither relief nor victory, only certainty. She had named the terms of her own dignity. That mattered more than apologies. Some relationships didn't need repair. They needed redefinition. Life moved forward in ways that felt deliberate. Elena accepted an invitation to present her literacy work at a regional education conference. Standing at the podium, she spoke with confidence born from lived experience, not borrowed validation. Julian watched from the audience, pride quiet and unmistakable. At home, they discussed future plans without urgency. When Elena discovered she was pregnant, the news settled gently between them, not as a milestone to impress anyone, but as a responsibility they welcomed together. Julian's parents received the news with joy, careful not to overstep. When Elena eventually told her parents, their response was emotional but respectful. They asked what role, if any, she wanted them to have. Elena appreciated the question. It signaled learning. Months later, Elena joined the board of the Mercer Foundation, contributing directly to policy decisions affecting public education access. She was not elevated because of her marriage. She was included because of her work. That distinction mattered deeply. One evening, as Elena reflected on the past year, she realized something had fundamentally shifted. Her identity was no longer defined by contrast. She was not the quieter sister or the less impressive daughter. She was a professional, a partner, and soon, a mother, on her own terms. Winter softened the city, and with it, Elena's remaining anger. Not forgiveness, clarity. She met her parents regularly, conversations sometimes awkward, sometimes honest. They spoke less about Vanessa and more about the future. Progress came in small, consistent gestures rather than grand apologies. Vanessa remained distant but no longer antagonistic. Elena accepted that not all change was immediate. When their daughter was born in the spring, they named her Amelia Grace. Holding her for the first time, Elena felt a fierce resolve take root. This child would never measure herself against someone else's expectations. She would be loved without conditions. Julian stood beside her, steady and present, exactly as he always had been. Elena's parents met their granddaughter with humility, following Elena's lead rather than asserting entitlement. Vanessa sent flowers with a note that made no demands. It was enough for now. As weeks passed, Elena balanced motherhood and work with the same patience she had always offered her students. She no longer waited for recognition to validate her effort. She trusted her own assessment. That trust was the quiet reward of everything she had endured. The past no longer haunted her. It informed her, shaped her, but did not define her. On the anniversary of her wedding, Elena returned to the garden where it had all unfolded. It looked ordinary now, peaceful, unremarkable. Standing there, she understood that the day's power had never come from transformation or spectacle. It had come from choice. She had chosen herself without resentment. Chosen partnership over approval. Chosen presence over performance. Vanessa's attempt to diminish her had instead revealed the strength Elena had been taught to doubt. The absence that once felt like rejection had become clarity. Elena did not romanticize what happened. Pain had shaped the lesson, and that pain was real. But it had also freed her. Julian joined her, their daughter asleep against his chest. Together, they looked toward a future built not on comparison, but on consistency. Elena no longer needed to explain her worth. She lived it daily, quietly, completely. The months that followed settled into something steady and real. Elena returned fully to her work after maternity leave, easing back into the classroom with the same patience that had always defined her. The children responded to her warmth, and the new literacy program continued to spread across the district, adopted quietly because it worked. Julian adjusted his schedule so he could be home early most evenings, taking late-night feedings without complaint. Their life together was not extravagant or performative. It was practical, affectionate, and deeply respectful. Friends noticed the change in Elena before she did. She laughed more easily. She spoke without hesitation. She no longer softened her achievements when sharing them. At family gatherings, she chose when to attend and when to stay home, without explanation. The power in that choice surprised her. Vanessa remained distant, appearing occasionally but without her former sharpness. When she spoke, she listened more than she talked. Elena neither pushed nor withdrew. She allowed space to exist as it was. Her parents followed Elena's lead, careful not to overstep, learning slowly through action rather than promises. Nothing was perfect, but it was honest. And honesty, Elena discovered, was more sustaining than approval ever had been. One afternoon, Elena received an email from a former student's mother, thanking her for changing their child's relationship with reading. The message was simple, heartfelt, and deeply familiar. Elena sat quietly after reading it, holding Amelia on her lap, understanding how far her life had come. The meaning she had always chased was right there. Julian found her later that evening, still thoughtful. He didn't interrupt. He never rushed her emotions. When she finally spoke, she told him she no longer felt like she was proving anything. Julian smiled, not surprised. "You never were," he said. That truth no longer stung. It settled. Their marriage wasn't built on rescue or reversal. It was built on alignment. They supported one another without competing for space. Decisions were shared. Responsibilities balanced. Love expressed daily in ordinary ways. Elena realized that the greatest shift wasn't how others treated her. It was how she treated herself. She no longer waited for permission to take up space. She already belonged where she stood. Spring returned, bringing renewal that felt earned rather than symbolic. Elena accepted a leadership role within the district, mentoring younger teachers navigating the same struggles she once faced. She didn't preach confidence. She modeled steadiness. Parents sought her advice. Colleagues respected her voice. At home, Amelia learned to laugh, her joy uncomplicated and contagious. Julian's parents visited often, never assuming access, always asking. Elena appreciated the restraint. It was love without pressure. Her own parents continued to show up in small, consistent ways. Meals dropped off, childcare offered when asked. Patience where impatience once lived. Elena didn't rush reconciliation. She allowed it to grow at its own pace. Vanessa sent a message congratulating Elena on her new role. There was no comparison, no hidden edge. Elena replied with a simple thank you. That was enough. Not everything needed to be revisited. Some things simply needed to be left behind. A year later, Elena stood once more at the historic inn for a small fundraising event supporting public education. This time, she wasn't a bride or a subject of curiosity. She was a speaker, invited for her work. Julian sat in the audience, holding Amelia, listening with the same attention he had given her since the beginning. Elena spoke about patience, persistence, and believing in people long before results appear. The applause felt genuine, not obligatory. Afterward, several young teachers approached her, grateful and inspired. Elena recognized herself in them. That recognition brought quiet satisfaction. Later that night, as they drove home, Elena looked out the window, remembering how that place once held heartbreak. It didn't anymore. Memory no longer carried weight. It simply existed. The past had not been erased. It had been absorbed, understood, and placed where it belonged. Vanessa reached out one final time that summer, inviting Elena to lunch. There was no agenda. No expectation. They talked about work, about the city, about Amelia. Vanessa listened when Elena spoke. When the lunch ended, they hugged briefly, awkward but sincere. Elena didn't promise anything beyond what felt real. Vanessa didn't ask. That restraint mattered. It suggested growth, even if it was incomplete. Elena returned home content, not relieved. Contentment felt stronger. She no longer measured moments by how they compared to others. She measured them by how they felt. Julian noticed the difference. "You're lighter," he said one evening. Elena smiled. She was. As Amelia grew, Elena watched her with a quiet determination. She would never let comparison shape her child's sense of self. Achievement would be celebrated, but effort would be honored more. Love would never be conditional. Elena understood now how easily families fall into patterns without meaning to. She also understood that patterns could be changed. It required courage, consistency, and the willingness to stop performing for approval. Elena and Julian built a home where honesty lived comfortably, where success didn't require explanation, and where absence no longer defined worth. The story Elena once believed about herself had ended. A better one had begun. Years later, Elena would think back to her wedding morning not with bitterness, but with understanding. That day had stripped away illusion and forced truth into the open. It had revealed who would stay, who would leave, and who she truly was when tested. Her sister's attempt to diminish her had failed in the most unexpected way. It hadn't broken her. It had freed her. Elena no longer waited to be chosen. She chose. She chose love that showed up. Work that mattered. A family built on presence, not performance. Standing in her kitchen one quiet evening, watching Amelia sleep while Julian cleaned up nearby, Elena felt whole. Not because everything was perfect, but because nothing needed to be proven. The life she had built was real, steady, and hers. And that was more than enough. Thank you for watching until the end. Don't forget to subscribe, like the video and share your thoughts in the comments.